Okay, what we've got here is Tony's Scrapbook by Tony Wands. I had a fun time researching this. I had not heard of Tony's Scrapbook or Tony Wands. And so researching what this was really pretty cool. Um, my notes on this, Tony's Scrapbook, Tony Wands. Tony Wands is an old-time radio personality. Very, very well-known guy, syndicated. He got his start at WLS in Chicago. He was syndicated with CBS. He was nationally known, and his success in radio led to his putting out a yearly scrapbook of things that he did on the air, things that he read on the air. Every year there would be a scrapbook of a collection of the stories that he told on his radio show. And he put out the scrapbook, as it turns out, for many years. Really interesting to research this. So my notes include Tony Wands' popularity led to Tony's Scrapbook, a yearly hardcover publication that was produced from about 1928 through about 1945. So he was very popular for a very long time. And in fact, some of his old radio shows are available to listen to online. Documentation is difficult. There are a lot of people that are interested in this, but documenting everything about it is tricky. That would take some time. This volume is the 1934-1935 edition. This is the 6th edition, so this is a pretty early one. Published by the Riley and Lee Company in Chicago. And he got his start at WLS in Chicago. As I said, some of the old shows are available online, and it's my understanding that he had a long association with Hallmark greeting cards. They were a sponsor of his show, a signature sponsor. So they were mentioned prominently. The book contains stories and poems that he read on the air. So each scrapbook is essentially a best of yearbook. So pretty interesting concept. The condition I put as acceptable. There is no dust jacket present. The cover was a wonderful textured metallic brown, and you can it's still a pretty cool cover. You can see that it's kind of almost a metallic brown, a really interesting color, and it's got a nice texture to it. And my notes include strongly embossed and stamped in black. It's got a good, deep, strong stamping, and it really pops. It looks good on the video, but it really pops when you've got it in your hand. Pretty sharp looking. Front cover still has strong color. Still looks really nice on the front cover. All the corners show wear. It's taken some corner hits, and more than corner bumps. The corners have had a tough time of it. The bottom four-edge corner of the front cover is heavily worn. This corner here took the worst of it. That's the most worn corner. By far the most worn corner. But all of the corners are bumped. It's just the way it is. Binding somewhat loose, but generally solid. A bit shelf cocked. The shelf cocking is fairly minimal. It's got a little bit of shelf cock, but the binding is still pretty solid. Still A little loose, but still pretty solid in my opinion. The top edge is pretty dirty, and that is from years of dust accumulation. I've done just a little bit of conservation to the top edge, and that has helped it a lot. Just a very conservative conservation, but I felt it needed to be done. So I have improved this top edge. Now it's still dirty. I didn't go overboard. I just cleaned it up a little bit. You can see the wear on the corners, but the binding still pretty tight. My notes say binding generally solid but somewhat loose, but it's really not that. It's really not that loose. It's still pretty solid. Okay, the foredge and the bottom edge. I've shown you the top edge, which is trimmed, cut. The foredge is deckled, but it's a very rough decal. And the bottom edge is also a very rough decal. And it's pretty unusual to see. It's not uncommon to see a deckled foredge or even a rough decal foredge. It's fairly unusual to see a deckled bottom edge, so that was in my mind when I was looking at the book. And this volume appears to have been what is called opened. My notes say this volume appears to have been opened, though I am not 100% certain. The last few pages certainly look to have been opened not carefully enough, thus are damaged at the edges, and it very much appears to me that this is the result of the reader opening the pages. Though those pages are damaged, they show, I believe, book design that you don't see very often anymore. Unopened pages are once quite common. The reader opened the pages as they read the book. So what the deal is with opening pages, and I don't know for sure that these were unopened pages, but it's my feelings that it was. The pages would have to be open as you read the book. Each leaf would still be bound, and you would take a card and you would slide it up the edge, and that would cut the page. It would open the page. And that's why these edges are so rough, because they were opened by hand. And the reason I particularly think they were open is a sloppy job was done of it on the last couple of pages. And so when you take the last couple of pages and you match them up, because they didn't do the best job of opening the pages, the tears and the folds match up. You can see here missing material, but on the next page you can see the fold of the material that's been torn away, and that's a giveaway for an open book. So I believe this book was produced with unopened pages, and the reader opened the pages as they read the book. It was once very common. You don't see it much anymore. But because those last few pages were done fairly sloppily, it's left to me evidence that this was originally an unopened book. So very interesting example. My other notes, pages that were not opened carefully would tear, leaving evidence that the book was published with an uncut or untrimmed text block. So if the printer trimmed or cut the text block, you wouldn't have to open the pages. The top edge is trimmed, top edge is cut. This also results in very rough looking edges. That's why the deckling is so rough. Similar to deckled pages seen on some books today that are made that way simply to be decorative. You'll see books today that have kind of a rough foredge, and that's all done to be decorative in the style of what you would get from old-time books when you actually open the pages and you got those rough edges. The pages show age toning, which is not a great thing, but not ruinous. A dog ear at page 95 and 96 is strongly creased. And this is interesting because it allowed dust to settle in the corners of page 94 and 97. It's a flaw, but it's a pretty cool one. I unfolded the dog ear myself. It's probably been there for 50 years, letting dust settle into that little slot where that dog ear was. And so the dust would just drop in there mote by mote. And I know it sat for a long, long time because I did some conservation on the top edge. So going to page 95, 96. 95, 96. Okay. Now here, you can very clearly see the dog ear. And they took a pretty good sized dog ear. And up here on the diagonal, the same diagonal as the dog ear, where this was folded down, up here, that's all dirt. This just mote by mote has settled down into that little sliver because of the dog ear. And so this is the dirt from that dog ear, which I think is pretty interesting, really. And if I turn the page, you've got the same thing on the other side of the dog ear, where over the years the dust settled in that tiny little crack because of that one dog-eared page. And so the pages on either side of it are dirty from the dust that has slid down inside. A collector would think I'm out of my mind. I think it's pretty cool. So in this case, I consider Condition as acceptable, a decent historical survivor, a really interesting read, and it's a pretty cool book. Here we have Tony Wands and the title page. And the whole thing is a collection of short little stories, short little poems, short little anecdotes of things that he had done on the air during that year that had proven especially popular. So this is the 1934-1935 Tony Scrapbook. Really famous in his time as a radio personality, and that's all I know to tell you. Check out the pictures and the description, and hopefully the video helped. And there you go.